The midnight ride. The city was eerily quiet at this hour. The neon lights flickered lazily over the empty streets as Ryan checked his phone. 12:47 a.m. He sighed, pulling his jacket closer to his body. The night air carried a strange, damp chill, even though it was the middle of summer. The subway entrance loomed ahead, its fluorescent glow buzzing softly. Ryan had always hated taking the last train home. It had a certain bleakness, a feeling of loneliness that settled deep in his bones. But he had no choice tonight. His shift had ended late, and there were no other options. As he descended the steps into the station, he noticed how quiet it was. Too quiet. Usually, even at this hour, there would be a few drunk passengers. Maybe a couple of workers heading home like him. But tonight, the station was nearly deserted. Nearly. A woman stood at the far end of the platform. She wore a long black dress, old-fashioned and tattered at the edges. Her long, tangled hair covered most of her face, and she clutched a small, decayed handbag in her hands. She didn't move. She didn't even seem to breathe. Ryan shivered but told himself not to be ridiculous. She was just another passenger. The distant sound of the approaching train echoed through the tunnel. The air grew heavier, thick with an unplaceable scent. Something old, something rotten. Ryan turned his head slightly, and for a brief second, he swore the woman was closer than before. The train screeched into the station, its brakes wailing like a dying animal. The doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing a nearly empty interior. Ryan stepped inside, choosing a seat near the window. The woman in black boarded as well, taking a seat across the aisle. The doors shut. The train lurched forward, diving into the dark tunnels. The strange passengers. Ryan glanced around. There were a few other passengers. An elderly man dozing off. A couple of students buried in their phones. And a man in a business suit staring blankly at nothing. Yet something felt off. The woman in black hadn't moved since she sat down. She clutched her bag tightly, her head slightly bowed. The way she sat was unnatural, as if her body didn't quite fit the shape of a normal human. The train rocked gently. The overhead lights flickered. Ryan turned his gaze back to his phone, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. He scrolled through his messages, but his hands felt oddly numb. The air inside the train was growing colder, the unnatural chill wrapping around him like invisible fingers. The train slowed as it reached the next station. Ryan looked up, expecting to see new passengers boarding. But the platform was empty. The doors remained closed. No announcements. No movement outside. Just an abandoned station, swallowed in darkness. Then, the train continued forward. Ryan frowned. Had they skipped the stop? He turned to the other passengers, but no one seemed to notice. Even the conductor's usual announcements were missing. A whisper brushed against his ear. "Get off at the next stop." Ryan's breath caught. He spun around, but the seat behind him was empty. His pulse quickened. Had he imagined it? The lights flickered again. This time, when they stabilized, something was different. The woman in black was no longer sitting across from him. She was now in the seat right next to him. The vanishing stops. Ryan's entire body stiffened. He could feel the presence beside him. Cold, suffocating, unnatural. But he didn't dare turn his head. The train continued its relentless journey through the underground. The next station approached. The name of the stop barely visible through the grimy window. Ryan stood abruptly, ready to get off. But as the train slowed, his stomach twisted. The station outside was completely abandoned, just like the last one. The name on the sign was faded, barely legible. The doors remained closed. Then, as if time had skipped forward, the train was already moving again. Ryan's breathing grew erratic. This wasn't normal. He turned to the other passengers, desperate for some kind of acknowledgement. They were all sitting completely still. Their faces were pale, expressionless, their eyes blank. They weren't blinking. A low, distorted hum filled the air. Ryan's skin prickled as he turned his gaze forward. The woman in black had moved again. Now, she was standing at the far end of the car, facing him. Her head twitched slightly. Then, her mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. The horror unfolds. The train lights flickered violently. For a split second, everything was plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, the passengers were no longer sitting in their seats. They were standing, facing him. Their hollow eyes locked onto his. Ryan's heart pounded as he stumbled backward, his body shaking. The hum in the air grew louder, distorting into whispers. "You shouldn't be here." His vision blurred. The walls of the train seemed to stretch, the seats warping into grotesque shapes. The woman in black began to move toward him. Not walking, but gliding, her feet barely touching the ground. Ryan turned and ran. He bolted through the train cars, his breath ragged. Each carriage he entered was the same. Passengers standing like lifeless mannequins, their faces contorted in silent horror. Then, he reached the last car. There was no exit. Only a mirror. A tall, distorted mirror, reflecting the empty train car behind him. But something was wrong. His reflection wasn't his own. It was grinning. And behind it, the woman in black stood, her skeletal fingers reaching toward him. The lights flickered one last time. The last stop. When Ryan opened his eyes, he was no longer in the train. He was standing on an abandoned platform. The station was decayed, forgotten. Cracks ran along the walls, the overhead lights barely functioning. There were no signs, no maps, no exits. The train was gone. Ryan turned frantically, his pulse racing. Then, he saw them. The passengers. They stood at the far end of the platform, watching him with hollow eyes. And in the center of them stood the woman in black, her twisted grin wider than before. A single, deafening sound echoed through the station. The distant screech of an approaching train. But there were no tracks beneath him. Only darkness. Ryan stepped back, his body trembling. The whisper returned, cold and final. "You should have gotten off." The ground beneath him crumbled, And then, nothing. The next morning, a subway train arrived at its final stop. The doors opened, but no one stepped out. The conductor checked the train. There were no passengers. But in the last car, near the window, there was a seat. On it lay a single, tattered handbag. And next to it, a reflection lingered in the window. One that did not belong to the empty train.